Well, hello, Dana, and we are back for our next episode of Maestro Mindset.
Woo! Yeah. What's on your mind?
I am like all into this Caitlin Clark thing. And she just recently passed Pete Maravich to set the all-time NCAA scoring record, which is just so cool.
So firm. And she's at University of Iowa, and my aunt lives there and has season tickets. So my aunt's watched all the games, watched her set the record.
That's really cool because you know what else that means? It saved your aunt $598, which was the average ticket price for the game according to Logitech's, which is like absolutely unheard of in the realm of women's basketball. And it's just mind-boggling to me what she's done for the visibility and the excitement around the game. I mean, and just recently she broke Lynette Woodard's women's college scoring record. She had her idol, Maya Moore, at the game, and then rapper Travis Scott.
I didn't know Travis Scott was there.
Yeah, he was sitting courtside.
Is he married to a Kardashian?
He dated Kylie.
Okay.
I'm really glad that I'm up on my Kardashian news. I wouldn't have been able to answer that. She got a shout out from LeBron, and LeBron had just surpassed 40,000 points. So it's, all about points and hoops.
Giving each other shout outs.
Yeah, I love the comment, the mutual admiration there. It was really super cool. But I also think it's super fascinating, by the way, just one final point here, that we seem to be trending on this year's episodes in our pop culture intros around amazing women and dog stories. I'm just saying.
There we go. And some pop culture, right? We had the Grammys, Maestro Mindset. I will tell you, I watched Oppenheimer this weekend and I respect it. I don't know if I loved it, but I'm glad I saw it.
I really liked it. Lauren and I watched it. Oh, Lauren's my daughter, by the way. Lauren and I watched it over the holidays. And it took 2 days.
Right.
It's pretty long. But we both really enjoyed it. I have to say, just to kind of summarize our Oscar opinions and reviews, I would have to go with The Holdovers and American Fiction as my two faves.
That's so funny. I was just talking about this with friends last night when we were sort of saying, what are the faves? I'm not sure either of those are going to win, but that's what I would go for.
I would put money on them. Put money on it that neither of them win.
Right, exactly.
They were my favorites. And I'd throw Barbie in there. I really enjoy Barbie. I thought it was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did too. All right, looping back to fitness. Do you remember, you might have dealt with this growing up in school. It was called the Presidential Physical Fitness Test and Award. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I did that. Uh-huh.
Okay. And apparently that was created, I think, by Reagan because there was this concern. It was Cold War and there was a concern that Americans were getting soft. So this idea of get the kids into fitness and so on. So our guest today, Rose, set his town record in one of the events.
Wow.
In the Presidential Physical Fitness Award. And he held it for decades. And his name was on the wall of his gym. And he came from a large extended family. And so it was, as his cousins grew up in school, it was always his cousin. But it was an event that I don't remember. I do remember the fitness test, but it's called the shuttle run. So you pick something up and you run it over this line, you put it down, and then you have to pick it up and run it back over again.
Yeah, I didn't remember that. I was wrong.
Okay.
Whatever I thought it was, that's not it.
So our guest for decades held the record at his school in his town.
Wow, that's exciting. So who is our guest today?
We're welcoming Roly Acosta, Roly short for Rolando, who is in the construction industry based in New Jersey. He's the second generation president and CEO of JAG Companies. His dad founded it in 75. And it's really a portfolio of construction companies. And they're focused on large and civil infrastructure projects like underground utilities and submarine power cables and treatment plants and all this crazy stuff I barely understand. They've got 350 employees. They complete projects across the US. And Roly grew up in a construction family. He's held positions in the field at construction sites. He's also then transitioned into the corporate side, got his law degree. He served as legal counsel, executive vice president, and then took over for his dad. They're very proud of their Cuban heritage, and Roly is a board member of the New Jersey IT Hispanic and Latino Council. He also has served on boards for different associations like the Utility and Transportation Contractors Association. That's where I met him. I was doing some strategy work with that group. And so, welcome, Roly. I'm just really thrilled you were willing to do this because I really find your background so interesting. We mentioned how you've kind of literally grown up in the industry, and now you're president and CEO of this generational company that your dad founded. And I'm curious, the lens of this podcast is management and leadership. And when you think back to your early experiences, whether it was working on construction sites or running projects, and then you were on the corporate side, what is it that when you think about as you kind of grew up in the industry has influenced your approach to management and leadership?
Being in a family business and being second generational offered me multiple lenses. So the first lens I always looked at it through was the lens of a kid, right? You're seeing your father go off to work for the company that he founded and meeting the different people that came in and out of the door of when I came into the family, our office was the first floor. So I'd come in from school and there's my dad estimating, there's vendors selling him pipe and materials. So I got to see, what leadership was at a very, very young age. And then, dad encouraged us to work in other industries. So I pursued a whole nother career in sports management. I wanted to be Jerry Maguire. I was going to be an agent. And then slowly he started to recruit me back in to the family business. It was an offer I couldn't refuse. It was less perks and half the salary. So I was like, why not? And I was getting married. So at that point, I started to say, hey, what is it that I wanted to do with my career in construction? And dad said, hey, just give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, I'll help you with your next steps. But from that first day on the job, I fell in love with construction. So my first hard hat was as the owner's kid. So now I have to grow beyond that and start. What I learned was earning the respect of the employees from every level, from craft labor to project management up to, leadership and executive management. And that offered me a tremendous opportunity to, how do people view you? How do people view others? And as I rose from, assistant superintendent to project manager, and then I took a little bit of time off to go to law school. And then I came back as general counsel, executive vice president, and ultimately president and CEO of the operating companies. What did I learn? What was I going to bring to the table in that new role? And it wasn't going to be the way my dad ran the company, because we were driven by one man. Now we're driven by multiple men and women in the industry within our company. And I was exposed to meetings that many others could not be in at a young age. I was in meetings to review bids. I was in meetings for negotiations. I met with the banks. I met with the surety. It was a fast track MBA through our business. And I learned again that you're not going to please everyone, but what you have to do is earn their respect, earn their trust, and everything from the banker to the tradesperson who's building your work. And that's a very broad width there.
When you were wearing the hard hat and you were earning respect, what were some of the methods that you used? A lot of our audiences are first-time managers or first-time leaders. And I think that's a critical little nugget that you shared with us, which is how do you earn that respect? How did you do that in some of your early leadership roles?
I would probably credit listening more than having to have all the answers. I was willing to listen to what somebody had to say to then provide a solution, provide a response that was the most informed. But at the same time, you had to show that person that you were speaking with that I heard you, and what I will respond with may not be what you want to hear, but at the very end, you'll understand. But I heard what you said, and now follow along and let's get in line with what I'm saying so that we move forward together. And at times is you want to give credit if you make somebody's telling you, hey, great decision. No, give credit to who helped you get there. So that's the earning part is, I didn't know anything. I was a student. I was working in sports. The Final Four was my job. And now I'm building sewer treatment facilities. We're putting pipe in the ground. I didn't know, but it was also that willingness to be vulnerable and say, hey, I don't know, but I'm going to learn from you as long as we can have that communication back and forth.
I love that. So in preparation for this interview on the pod, I was out on JAG's website and I saw in a safety video that you mentioned your fear of heights. Yet there was this one time where you had to show up at a construction site and go down an 80-foot shaft to set and lead by example. So my first comment is, God bless you. I wouldn't have been able to go down the 80-foot shaft. But what my question for you is how has that lead by example philosophy shown up in your management style as you progress through the company?
Fear of heights is like one of my, I don't have very many fears, but that's definitely one where the knees are buckling, the hands are shaking, and all you're thinking is about your safety person's telling you 4 points of contact as you go down that ladder, and don't look down, don't look up, just eventually you'll get there. How is that leading by example? So that's one of those phrases everybody wants to use. I lead by example, and it's how I live my life. How you should follow it. And you could do it the old way, where somebody's has a rope and they're pulling the chariot full of people from the front. That's not who I am, right? Is my lead by example is really an understanding that what I'm asking for you to do as part of our business, I should be willing to do as well. I may be fearful of heights, but if I'm tied off properly and I need to go down that shaft or I need to walk across a steel beam to get somewhere, well, I should be willing to do it as well. It's also we keep crazy hours in construction. You could be on a first shift, that's 7 to 3:30. You could be on we run 24-hour operations, 12 to 12, 12 to 12, 6 to 6, 6 to 6. Well, am I willing to show up when the first shift is there? Am I willing to be there when the second shift goes home? We work remote places. We work, far drives. Am I willing to make that same drive? Am I willing to go to those meetings that our employees go to every day? And that to me is leading by example, and it's leading with the group. And I'm not trying to say I'm some philosophical person that's going to publish a book and it's different than everybody else. But to me is, again, I think it goes to your original question is how do I lead different from, let's say, my dad or others? Is this the way I came up through the business? I'm out there as some of the foremen were laborers when I was in the field. And we kind of make sure we check in on each other, that nobody's head's getting any bigger, and that it's hey, I remember when, I remember when you bailed me out of a stupid decision I made, and let's keep that between us. And that to me, that's leading by example, and remaining and keeping that some level of humbleness is very important.
Did you really walk across the steel beam that was high in the air? Oh, I was kind of like, I got huge agita when you said, my dad did, by the way. My dad was a steel worker, and he used to walk across beams that were stories up in the air. And I'm like, I don't know how you did it, dude.
Tremendous respect for the craft labor and what they do and make us do, accomplish what we can, is because they're willing to do that as well.
Yeah. And also, when you're looking at that video on your website, it's all about safety, right? And actually, Rose and I have a bit of background on this because we both worked at Intel Corporation on the manufacturing side, which also, granted, you weren't working at heights and under the ground, but there was a lot of safety issues you had to be careful about. And to me, I've often seen it. It's a challenge when, the leadership, there is a vision. We must be safe. We must look out for each other. But to really proliferate that so that every single person who is a supervisor can reinforce that and genuinely live that for their people and create that experience for staff, that's a whole different thing, right? And I'm just curious, how your organization is large at this point and you have a variety of different companies. How do you, not just you personally, but just how do you and the company approach really implementing that mentality or ensuring that your front line has that mentality and truly practices it and enables it?
Safety is a priority for all of us. Interestingly, we did not make safety one of our core values. We have reputation, work ethic, and team accomplishment, and we feel that safety is woven into each one of those already. And we also, safety first. Well, we need to make money. Okay. So really, is that really first? That's probably first because that's the only way we stay in business. But safety has to be integral part of the production, integral part of everything that we do. So that's why one, it's not one of our core values because it's already integrated into that part of it. And then with our safety team is what are we doing to push it down the line, right? We can sit in classrooms and teach, which is what we do. We bring in keynote speakers. We do all of those things. But how do we truly reinforce it? And our timing here is really cool because we just changed our entire motto for the company. So we went from, for several years it was safety, it's not optional, to we had a contest within the company to say, hey, give us ideas, give us thoughts. Let's make this, organic from within the organization. And one of our construction administrators, I should say, came up with gear up, speak up, be safe. So what do those platforms say, right? Gear up. Make sure you're wearing the proper PPE when you go to work, and we will provide that to you. And then the biggest part is that speak up. We're encouraging you. If you don't feel safe, say something. If you don't feel that we're going to start this operation and you're not comfortable with it, well, let us know. Let's walk you through it. And then leads to the be safe part of it. And I think that's important to how do you push it down the line? You let the employee see how do we view safety.
You have an incredibly psychologically safe environment, and you're continuing to perpetuate that, and not only what you write, but what you do. And kudos to you in your leadership team for creating that type of environment.
Yeah, one of the things we do, we try to enforce, or I should say, try to, when somebody comes on, when we onboard a new employee, is what we're saying. It's not marketing material. We want to operate in this manner, and we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect, but if we're that much better than the next company or that much better than the next contractor, well, those employees are going to want to stay working for us. That owner wants us on the job. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is how not to make it a marketing piece, how to make it really part of the leadership and management team's work with our people.
This reminds me a little bit. I don't know if you had a chance to listen, but Rose, it's reminding me of the Damar Hamlin episode we did last season. You might remember really what happened there. The football player who collapsed on the field his heart had stopped. And we broke that down because happily it was a positive outcome at the end. But we broke down how it was a combination of leadership and pretty tight management that saved his life. If someone had just been saying, we have to be prepared if a player has a medical issue, like that wouldn't have been enough. You need to operationalize that and ensure that every single person on the side of that field would know what to do if that happened. And so it's sort of a combo.
That leadership, when you're in a stressful situation, that's really separating who knows their role and who doesn't. And, one of the things that we do, before we mentioned, 80-foot shafts, they're not always that deep. Some are a little more shallower, is in some of our projects. Yeah, but we do tunnels, and some of them I've crawled into and some of them I have not. But we do collaborate with local first responders and give them an opportunity to, one, practice a rescue, two, hey, how do you feel working in this environment? What we're doing, you may have never experienced what we're doing here. And it's not just in tunnels. We work, lay submarine power cables. We're offshore. How quickly can a first responder get to a barge if there's a medical situation? So the leadership part is how prepared are we beforehand when something happens, and how are we going to respond? We're never going to know human nature. Some people will freeze. But if everybody does their job, like in the Damar Hamlin situation, that's when you really have a shot at it.
Well, the other thing that example I think accentuates is something that Diana and I talk about frequently, which is strong leaders and strong managers aren't afraid to collaborate and ask for help. And that example shows that collaboration with the first responders not only improves and shows to your employees the importance of the message and the mantra and the culture that you're creating and what you're willing to do in terms of asking for help to enable it. But like you mentioned, it also provides them an opportunity to prepare in the unfortunate case that something does happen. So I think, again, just like the conversation around crisis management, the collaboration, the asking for help is also something that's clear by your responses, that are strong in your leadership and management approaches. So thank you for that. That's a great example.
And you've already actually set this question up perfectly. There's always a natural tension between a focus on results, and you brought up, by the way, we need to make money. You know what I mean? So there's always a natural tension between the need for results and ensuring a respectful, safe workplace that's also enjoyable in the sense you already said it, that people would want to stay. And there's those things can sometimes feel in opposition to each other. But I firmly believe most of the time you can have a healthy tension between the two. So I'm just curious how you and your team approach that.
Healthy tension. That's catchphrase, accountability. Yeah, we all have it, right? So I would, in line with what Rose was sharing about, I don't have the answers. We don't have the answers to everything. Always looking for help and assistance. Is a couple years ago, I was exposed to a speaker who was introducing this program called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it was just a way to manage your meetings, a way to manage your business that allowed you to collaborate, to bring you to the table. And one of the main cornerstones of EOS is open and honest conversation, open and honest discussion. So when it came to accountability was, there's an agenda, you have your scorecard, which is the numbers measure you. They don't lie. So you can have healthy tension when you're talking about numbers, and it's not personal. It's not, the numbers don't lie. And it allowed you to create an issues list. And you put whatever you want on there, and we're going to have an open and honest discussion, because it was the only way we'd get to a solution of that issue. And then we can walk away. And again, it was one of those that we may not all agree with what the solution is, but we all were heard. And now we all walk away and execute on that solution. And that was really important to us. And we have it at the highest, my executive level meetings to project level meetings. And the drive behind it is the open and honest conversation. And then along the way for accountability is every quarter there are company goals and there are your own personal goals to achieve. And we measure it. It's 3 to 5. Did you get any of them done? Did the person next to you get all 5 and you only got 2? Well, how important were they? What are they? Now let's move on to the next quarter. So for us is having that platform to just open up the discussion. But I'm always reminded, I forget which movie it was, where Will Ferrell says, well, with all due respect, and you can say whatever you want afterwards. We didn't want that's not what we were looking for. But I said with all due respect. It was more about what's the platform where everybody sees the agenda ahead of the meeting and you are prepared for that conversation. Now let's open and discuss it. And some of them are uncomfortable about myself. It's funny when we say it, is people will say, hey, sometimes your dad comes out in you in a little bit, and you always complained how you didn't want to be your dad.
That's major feedback.
With certain issues. So I get it. It's like, hey, remember when we told you that sometimes you're doing things your dad's way? Well, this is one of those times. And I have to just keep my mouth shut, say thank you for the feedback.
Yep. Feedback is a gift. It's a gift.
Yeah, that's funny.
Well, I'm sure you can figure out why I thought he'd be great to have on. I mean, first of all, very interesting journey that is so far from mine. The fact that he literally grew up watching this company and watching his dad. It's just so different. And I find it fascinating. And yet again, there's some core principles he was talking about, which I think apply to any setting. And one that really resonated for me as a hot take was his focus on listening, and how I loved what he said. I may not do what you want, but you will know that I listened and you will feel heard. That I really, really liked. What did you think of that?
I actually had that as one of my hot takes as well. And he added to that, and when I listen, if I do take your input, I want to give credit where credit is due. And all of that requires a willingness to be vulnerable, which is a topic we talked about in season 1, if you recall.
Yeah. And I will say, I wasn't someone in the workplace that was obsessed with getting credit, but it would be a little irksome. Say my manager went and shared like a model or some concept or framework that I had come up with and didn't happen to mention. I don't care about massive strokes. I like that he brought that up. And I also liked it's clear that regardless of the role he has running 4 or 5 different companies at this point, it's clear how much he wants to stay connected to and authentic with every level. And he kept talking about sort of like the craft tradesmen and so on.
And that exact point led me to my other hot take, which I loved, when he said, I should be able to do whatever I ask you to do. And that played in across examples of, he said they're 24/7. So am I willing to work an off shift? They work at remote locations. Am I willing to go visit? And he said, as their leader, I need to be able to do whatever I ask them to do. And then he also talked about, to your point, the connectivity, the connective tissue. And you could tell that, the relationships that he developed with and the foremen who were once laborers, and when he was young in the field and now he's the CEO, that he still reaches into those relationships for critical input.
He does it very purposefully to keep him grounded. I stay in touch with those guys regularly. I want them to like give me the real skinny and remind me of who I am. So yeah, so many things.
Any other hot takes?
Well, I mean, there's a million, but that'll do for now. And I'm just looking forward to episode 2 with Roly.
Yes, stay tuned for episode 2 with Roly Acosta, where we will then also talk about his leadership in a industry consortium and how he handled his workforce during the pandemic and now post-pandemic. So looking forward to seeing you in the next episode with Roly.